Good afternoon, this is Bram Luiten from @Meyer with a short video on DSpace debugging, specifically for DSpace 6 development and for the use of debugging in IntelliJ. I was browsing around in my locally installed DSpace 6 and I have one community here, a collection and one item. And it's working pretty well, except for something very annoying that I noticed is that even though I have my 3 locales set up, so I have English, Deutsch and Français, the links don't seem to work. So I click on English, of course it stays English, but I click on German or I click on French and nothing happens. The interface doesn't change. Also when I go to another page, the attribute is there in the link, the page reloads pretty fast because it's a local installation and still it doesn't do anything. So I thought this would be a nice bug or a nice problem to show you how I would approach this using some tools with IntelliJ, and would be very interested to hear your feedback. So let's open up IntelliJ and show you a few things there. So if you're unfamiliar with IntelliJ, compared to my previous video, it's now set up with the black background. That's the Darcula or the Blackula theme, which is easier on the eyes, especially if you're developing at night. And you're also seeing here my local.cfg file. This is the new configuration system where you can put in all kinds of config parameters that will actually override the ones in DSpace.cfg at runtime. And what I've added here is that I've added English, German and French as supported locales. So obviously I've already compiled and built this, used &update, and now it's deployed, and I can already see some evidence of this being deployed because the links were here to start with. So I'm right now in the debugging process. I don't assume that it's a problem with actually registering this configuration, because I'm quite confident that somehow this config has made it into the interface. Few more things about IntelliJ. I have set it up with ant like in my previous video, so I can start ant targets from here. And you will notice that some of the bars are missing. So I'm showing you which shortcuts, of the shortcuts I use at the bottom of the screen. So for example, the top bar is missing, so I'm actually using Alt-Command-R if I want to set up a run command. So why isn't that working at the moment? Because actually my DSpace is already running. Let's just shut it down for a second and show you what I mean. So shutting down is Command F2. I'm actually now disconnecting my DSpace, so it's no longer there. So to run it, I just go Alt-Command-R, and then I can choose either I can do my Maven compilation here, or I can start my Tomcat, and if I want to start it, I start it in debug mode by default if I just hit enter here, or I can also run it, but actually you also always want to run it in debug mode to place breakpoints and to do other kinds of things. Just to make sure that I show you how I have configured Tomcat here, is that in the deployment screen, it's important that I'm only deploying Solr for search and discovery and XML UI. So I'm not deploying REST or JSP UI, because that only takes time and it has no benefits here. For the log files, to view the log files in IntelliJ while you're running, you can have this tab, and here I've deliberately added the DSpace log, which is configured to the place where I store today's DSpace log. So we will have easy access to that one as well. So let's say that I want to start up my DSpace in debug mode. So I hit Alt-Command-R again, then DSpace Web Apps, and then debug mode. So this opens up the debug screen that you can access by command 5, and what you see here in the output is the output that you would see on your command line if you would start up DSpace from the command line as well. So that typically ends up in your catalina.out if you haven't configured that in a specific way, and then it automatically starts up DSpace here. Let me switch back. So this is shown in the server tab here. It shows me that I have 2 web apps deployed, Solar deployed successfully, and XML UI as well. And then in the DSpace log file, I can see the contents of dspace.log. It seems to be some other stuff going on here, but I'm not going to investigate this right now. So now DSpace is running and I have this debugger, and there are a lot of buttons and tools here that I will show you later on. But the first thing that we need to do is finding out where we want to pause or where we want to break the program to analyze what's going on. So, and I found that a very difficult thing to do, because you need to have a little bit of knowledge about the internal structure of the software. So if I'm now just hitting pages or hitting links, the debugger will not stop automatically, it will just run. And the great thing about the debugger is you can set breakpoints, the software will pause, and you get a chance to look at the snapshot, of what are the objects, what are the parameters while the system is executing. So what do we know? We have a problem with I18N or L10N localization or internationalization, and it's also, we have an attribute here called Locale. So whenever I'm not entirely sure where I need to look in the DSpace software, I just use the overall search in IntelliJ to find some of the related classes and to see where I need to be, because I'm not an expert in the development of the localization features. I just try to find some clues of maybe it's my own configuration, or maybe the problem is somewhere else. So to do this, I use the search everywhere feature in IntelliJ. That's twice on the shift key. And when I look for things like locale, I see something here called DSpace locale action, which is in the path I can see here, part of XML UI. We're using XML UI, so this might be a good candidate. Or when I look for I18N, we have something called I18N util. So let's just look at these 2 classes for a second. The I18N util, I will just close the debugger to make a little bit more space in the screen, and also my project window at the left. I also don't need that at the moment. So this is I18N util. So what kind of classes does it have? Get a default locale, make a locale, get ePerson locale, or get the supported locales. All of the locales that are supported. So maybe if the program ends up here, or is going to investigate some of the locales, it might be useful to stop here for a second. So let's add a breakpoint, and we just do it by clicking here, and then we see a red button. This one might be interesting as well. So we break here. When the program arrives here, it will pause. The other class that I had when I searched again was when I was looking for locale. I saw DSpace locale action, which is part of XML UI. It keeps a locale validator, so it seems it has this act method that at the moment when debugging this, I don't understand what's going on. But here it seems like there is something going on with supported locales and some validator that goes on here, so it might be useful to break here as well. So when I put up my debug window again, I can see that when I click this, I can see what breakpoints I have configured. So I can easily activate and deactivate them. So I now have 3 breakpoints in place. So let's try to see what the effect is here by just clicking the locale links once again and see if IntelliJ will break, or if the code will arrive at these breakpoints that I just defined. So I'm hitting French, and indeed automatically DSpace brings me back. So now we are effectively, the program has passed, and I am now in the I18N util class, where we have apparently broken, or where we have passed the code. Now let's just take a pause and see what we see, or what kind of options we have. So here at the left, I have some options to see that I can resume the program. So if I want to have the program executing again normally, then I can press this, or the shortcut. I can shut down my Tomcat entirely, and this is the one that we used for accessing the breakpoint. But there are two important other ones are F8 to step over a specific function, and F7 to step into a function or a method call. And that's important because we will be using those a lot. So let's say that now we have broken the program here at line 129. If I step over the execution, I will just stay in the same method and I will go to 131. And when I step into, I will effectively go into the execution of this method call, where we will get this get instance on the service factory and then get configuration service. So I'm just going to step in them right now. So now I'm in some class called service factory, and it returns service manager. It returns the service it returns the factory, but I'm not going into more detail here. So now I'm stepping over this, so I exit the method again, and I'm again at the point where I was. So I did actually this instance method, and then I do the get configuration service, which is also something that I don't think there's something wrong with right now. So I'm just gonna step over it right now instead of stepping in there. The great thing about IntelliJ, I think the last 2 or 3 versions, is that it, after the execution of the method, it gives you some information on what's contained in these variables. So here it will tell me that this variable config is now initialized with a config directory that I have right here. And now normally the locales that I have should be filled into this string. So normally I expect English, German and French to be in there. So I'm stepping over again. And here in my variables window, I can look at these variables in a little bit more detail, and I can see indeed that we have English, German and French in there as well. So that seems to check out, or seems to be correct. So right now this I18N method, I don't know exactly what to call this. This was called by add page meta in the navigation class. It's in the side menu, in the navigation menu. So I'm just going to continue, because here it seems like the locales are filled in correctly. So I'm continuing the execution of the program. And now it's just running, it's not breaking anymore. Let me see if I do this again. We are again at the same step in I18N util, where the locales are just being registered correctly. And it makes sense, because it's the place where this type of the links to the different languages are being added to the page. So at this point, I just want to shut down my DSpace and start it over all again with these the breakpoints that are now defined. And those are these breakpoints, because I still have the feeling I'm cheating a little bit, because I figured out the problem before, and I know that it has something to do with this locale action in XML-UI, where the list of supported locales is defined when DSpace is starting up. So let's start DSpace again, and I hope, or I expect, that it will break here on this specific point. So this is Solar. Solar is deployed, and then we're continuing with XML UI. And indeed, I'm now breaking on a different class or on a different point, namely this DSpace Locale Validator. So Locale Validator gets initiated with the locales that are supported. This supported locales thing will get filled out, and here we do see a difference. That I'm just stepping over each of these methods right now to show you the example where it goes wrong. So I'm going over here. It has this supported locales area at 0 here. It retrieves it from the configuration service. It retrieves the property. But instead of having English, French, and German, I'm just stuck with English here. So this is the point in the code, or this is an area of the code where it already goes wrong. So even when we continue, we just see that we're only stuck with English as the supported locale. So this is an important point when you notice that, okay, this is the part of the program where the values that we expect are no longer there. So then we know we have to step into one of these execution calls and look at those in a little bit more detail. So that's going to be in this execution step. So normally I can shut down DSpace again entirely and restart, but there's a very handy trick you can do here, and it's called drop frame, and then you drop the whole point from where you started the debugger and just start over again with the state as it was before. It doesn't always work because, of course, if you have manipulated the database or did something else, the drop frame thing can have a little bit of side effects. But in this case, where we just watched the system and didn't manipulate anything, it just works fine. So I've dropped this. So I'm stepping into the execution of the creation of the locale validator with F7. And the if method checks if the parameter is present. So I'm not going in there because the if gives a result of true. So now I'm in here, and this is the call where it will go wrong. So I'm stepping in here. The first thing will just give me the service factory. I'm stepping out again, and then I'm stepping in to get the configuration service. It just returns another object, configuration service, and then I'm stepping in one more time for the third method call, because we get 3 method executions behind each other to access this get property method. So I'm stepping in here, and this brings me to a class called DSpace configuration service, where we have a string get property from a string name. If the property is not found, null is returned, and it should be returned as a string. So I actually expect one string that has the 3 languages in there. And here it calls something else with that name, webui.supported.locales, but then followed by null. I'm stepping in there again. And that's normally a kind of default value. So we don't have a default value here, but we're actually passing the null object. And again, we're stepping one method further in the execution. And we will see every time on these frames where we are coming from. So we came from the locale action, and then we are 3 method calls deep into a configuration service right now. And now we have a generic method that can work on different types, where it gives me back the property in a specific type. So I'm stepping in here to see what's going on there. That's just the method below. Again, we're checking if the key exists, and we will know it exists, so it's true here. And then something funny happens. We get the Java object class, we get a type, and that type is initialized as an object, apparently according to the person who wrote this, to avoid the null pointer exception. We're stepping over this assignment. Default value in this case is indeed null. So we leave type as is. So type is just the type of an object, and then we will step into this new convert, the convert method. The convert method that will get me the parameter and finally give it to me as a specific type, and here as the type object. So I'm stepping in here. Checks again if the configuration contains that specific value. We know it's there. And then actually it is an array of values because it's English, French and German, but the type is currently not recognized as an array, it's just an object. So when we do this check, it will skip over this because it's not being recognized as an array right now. And now it will try to match if we can transform that object into a string. And this is the point when I will bring up the project dialog again to see where we are in the DSpace project. So also with command 1 I can bring up the hierarchy. I'm still in the service manager class package. But what happens here, this kind of retrieval from the configuration, is when I will actually start accessing the underlying code, the Apache Commons configuration code, instead of the DSpace code. So I'm stepping in here and get me a string for a certain key. The key is webui.support.locales. Again, I will step into this getString method. And it's great, so even the code, even though the code is not part of the DSpace project, IntelliJ still gives me a view on decompiled code. So even from these dependencies, I can still debug, or I can still go in there to see what's going on. So I step further, and then I have this getString for resolve container store key. I will also step into that method. And I will get the property from this combined configuration object. And then we will see that this value, what's returned here, is indeed an array list, and it has the 3 values right here, English, German and French. So right now we are still good. We continue the execution, and it does a check if the value, if it's the type is a collection. So it's indeed a collection because it's an array list, and the array list is now transformed into a collection object. And then we will see that the value, this value object that this method will return, will either assign null if the collection is empty, which it isn't, or an iterator that enables us to go over that collection. So it's actually going to be that iterator, and then that iterator will be returned. Oh, no. The problem is the iterator won't be returned. That's the whole problem. Instead of returning the whole collection here, we're only returning one value of this this collection. So this is the point when we had English, French and German, that it is only returning English right now. So English is being returned here. It's being returned here again. We step out of there. We're still in the Apache code right now. We still just have English. It's not null, so we're returning this string en. And then here we're stuck with the fact that we're just returning English instead of English, French and German. So I don't understand this code well enough, so I don't know why that call to an object was made, and I also don't know that why, because it was a string, or we would expect a string with multiple values in there or multiple commas. So why we weren't able to get this type of execution or this type of retrieval of the values. And I'm stepping out of here again. And this is the way how the whole English value gets propagated again, up until the point where we originally started in the creation of this DSpace Locale validator. So even though I found the source of the problem, I didn't write the original code, and I don't know at this point why that cause to object was made. So, but that doesn't mean that this whole exercise of debugging was useless, because I'm now still able to report it in Jira, or to give other developers some insights in what happened, so the original creator may fix this. It would have been cool if I could have come up with a master solution to actually fix this, but I'm kind of at the end of my wits here. But still, starting up the debugger, setting breakpoints, using the drop frame, stepping into, stepping out of code. I hope that this video makes it a little bit clearer. There's also another video on useful IntelliJ shortcuts that I will post in the description, which makes a lot of sense to go through. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and happy debugging.